Hello everyone. Thank you for joining Malone University's Enactus team as we present Setting Your Salary, Part 2 of 2. A brief overview of discussing salary-related concerns with a prospective employer. Everyone at all skill levels should listen carefully and sharpen these skills when looking for a job. As I mentioned, this is Part 2 of a 2-part series, so if you did not listen to Part 1 on setting your salary, I strongly encourage you to do so. So to pick up where Part 1 left off, some things to consider in terms of discussing salary with a prospective employer. You always want to make sure that you have a range in mind prior to interviewing. You never want to go into an interview having not thought about this question. It's also important to note that you don't really want to be fixed on one specific number, whether that be an hourly rate or a salary rate. You want to have a range in terms of where this prospective employer could come back and kind of fall within that range. So you want to make sure that you have that prepared prior to actually going for an interview. Also, make sure you do research on the pay of similar positions. There's a lot of things to take into consideration here. The area in which you live can make a big difference here. Also, you want to make sure that the position and the area of expertise that you need to effectively do the job match the pay. So you want to make sure that you do the research, try to find similar positions and see what they are paying so you can come up with a good number. Also, you want to be a little bit flexible on your worth. Again, you don't want to be just set on one number. Be able to move around a little bit in terms of an hourly rate or a salary rate. That's also important too. You need to consider if it is hourly or salary, because obviously there's a lot of different perks and benefits to those two. So you want to make sure that you take that into consideration. And also in terms of talking about salary and hourly rates and just compensation in general, you'll want to try to wait for that topic to be brought up by the interviewer. Obviously, in Part 1 of this podcast, I kind of described when you should bring it up if you have to. But overall, it's just kind of best to wait for this topic to be brought up by the interviewer. However, though, that does not go without saying that it might not be brought up. So it might be on you to reach out in terms of getting this topic to the table. And also, you'll want to make sure that you don't feel inclined to accept the offer. Obviously, when you're in a situation with your interviewing and it's kind of a tense situation, you're nervous, you might just accept anything that they offer you. You want to make sure that you don't feel inclined to accept their offer. You could always negotiate on it. So that's an important fact to take into consideration. How do you know how much you're worth? Obviously, there's a lot of different answers to this question. It's a kind of ubiquitous, but we'll want to make sure that we take it into consideration. The best way to go about doing this is research what people in the position that you are applying for and with your amount of experience are making in the area that you want to work. So obviously, it's just kind of look at examples. What are other people making in the same position or close to the same position? Do they have the same levels of expertise? Do they have the same level of training? Do they have the same level of development that you have? You'll want to take that all into consideration to figure out exactly what you're worth. And obviously that's done on an individual basis, but with looking at other people in terms of their positions and how that relates to you. You'll also want to make sure that you determine if you should be paid more than the average salary of someone in your position based on if you have better skills or experiences. So if you have a real key skill or if you have great expertise in a certain area, that could be more valuable than somebody that doesn't have that. So you'll want to take that into consideration when you determine how much you're worth. Do you have anything that's very unique and very specific that could be worth more than the average person? So those are just a few things to take into consideration when figuring out how much you're worth. And then I don't want to leave without giving everyone a very big caution. Always get it in writing, as they say. Never depart from your current position without having an offer in written form. It's very easy for somebody just to say, of course I'll give you this position, or you're hired. But if they just say it verbally, there's really no substance to it. So you always want to make sure you get it in writing. You never want to find yourself in a situation where you turn in your termination notice because you're going to go to a new job only to not have that new job. That's obviously a very difficult and an unfortunate situation. So you want to make sure that you always get everything in writing. You also want to communicate your interest in having not only the job title and responsibilities in writing, but also your compensation. That's where that relates to this podcast. Make sure that you not only have the position in writing, but you also have the compensation. That way, there's no insecurities. Everything's very clear-cut and straightforward. And there's no way for any organization or you or anybody to change their mind. The offer is there. It's in written form. And it describes not only your job position, title, and responsibilities, but also your compensation. Additional info can be found here in addition to this podcast if you're interested. And also, local resources and navigating partners that are willing to help you with these types of situations. There's 4 incredible organizations here that would be willing to help you, and you can feel free to check out those links as well. I'd like to thank you for joining us today. We hope you gained valuable insights and ideas from this podcast. And please view our other episodes for even more content on a wide array of topics.